Hey, Nick, thank you so much here. We at Morning Consult have truly valued our partnership with you and the ANA. During this session, we have a lot in store for you. So we'll have, as Nick mentioned, an opportunity to hear from two of the world's leading marketers. We're also going to share findings on the global workforce that we conducted in an exclusive study for the ANA by Morning Consult. So let me first start with some introductions. So Pam Forbes is SVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Pernod Ricard North America. She is a member of the board of directors of the ANA and the Marketing Science Institute, and she previously held marketing leadership roles at Walt Disney Studios and PepsiCo. Hey, Pam, welcome to the conversation. And I just wanted to ask you first, what are you most looking forward to during this conversation?
Just sharing and learning from each other, and getting your advice. I love getting insights from Morning Consult and my peers. So enjoy just having the conversation, sharing what we learned, which we did have some pretty neat insights as we were still in COVID on how to think about the consumer and the campaigns we're working on, and hopefully it helps somebody.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing this virtual room with you for the next 55 minutes or so. And let me next say that I have the privilege of introducing Stephanie Tias. So you're Vice President Marketing and Global Brand Management at IHG Hotels and Resorts. Real broad purview too. She leads marketing and brand management for the largest brand, a $5 billion brand, Holiday Inn Express, where she's responsible for a global team focused on brand strategy, brand marketing, product design, brand experience growth, and commercial performance. Hey, Stephanie, welcome to the conversation. What are you most looking forward to during this conversation?
Again, I echo Pam's comments. Just super excited to connect and share. It's been a phenomenal last 18 months in many different ways. And I'm so happy that we've been able to learn from the experience and have an impact. So excited to share with all of you.
Well, thank you, Pam, and thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to start off the conversation by sharing for a few minutes some exclusive findings on the global workforce and what remote workers are thinking during these times. And we're going to go back and forth between sharing a couple slides and asking these marketers their perspectives on a range of campaigns, on their experiences and more. So I'm just going to jump in for a few minutes, and then we'll go back to the conversation. So we conducted a 6-country study of average adults and remote workers for the ANA, and I thought I would just get started by sharing a couple general findings on remote work. Thought it could really set the scene for this conversation that we're going to have. So first and foremost, we asked a simple question among remote workers, that is those who are spending most of their time remotely. Do you agree or disagree with the following statements? So 75% say that they are more productive working remotely than in person, and majority say that they end up working longer hours than when they're working in person. About 52% also say that they're feeling less connected to their coworkers as well. If we zoom out a little bit more to a broader set, this is actually 8 items that we asked people, including whether they feel more productive. I would highlight at the bottom. So about a third say that their remote workplace makes it more difficult for them to focus, but about 2/3 disagree with that. So there's really an interesting finding there on focus. If we go one up here, about 35% say that it feels difficult to advance their career when they're working remotely. So I think that's probably something that will come up a good amount over the course of the conversation that I have with Pam and Stephanie, in addition to learning a lot more about them and all of the good work that they're doing. Let me show one more figure, and then I'm going to zoom out with a couple great questions for them. So everything we did here, we did in the US, and then we replicated it globally just over the last couple days. So there's a good amount of numbers on this slide, but we asked these same agree, disagree statements among remote workers in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Germany, in Singapore, in South Korea, and in Brazil. And if there's one key takeaway here, I would highlight that remote workers across countries say they generally feel more productive, but less connected. It's this tension that is coming up more than a year into the pandemic. So with that, I wanted to go back to Pam and to Stephanie and ask them a couple other general questions. So could I start with Pam? Just kind of a high level question for you. Pam, could you maybe talk about how your team's plans and priorities are shifting today in light of employees working remotely around time zones and around the world, Pam?
Sure. Our company has a long history of having an agile work policy. So working from home is not new to the teams. I think it's just the amount of work we're doing. Absolutely, we've seen increases in productivity and people working very long hours. We've gone through a massive transformation of our marketing system with new leadership that came on board. I started a couple months into the pandemic, and we're rolling out sort of a lot of new ways of thinking about brand strategy. And it's taken a toll on the teams. I think we learned pretty quickly that the pace we were going at wasn't quite sustainable. So we started to shift to focus more on people's well-being, because the work was absolutely getting done in record time than we thought we could get it done. And so, getting that continuous feedback of what's working, what's not working, and how do we adjust our work pace and a cadence to enable more, I think, self-care and well-being. Agree that, people are telling us that they're working too many hours, the blurring lines between personal and your business life, as well as feeling disconnected and missing a lot of the what we call conviviality at Pernod. And so we're trying to put in place, safety measures, but doing what we can for the people as well. So moving things around so that we don't have Monday morning meetings where people have to present stuff, because that means they're probably working on the weekend, for example. So we're making changes into sort of our business cadence of things, as well as, encouraging people to, come together safely if they feel comfortable, outside for lunch type of thing. But we have not fully opened our office. It's very optional. And it works okay because we're very used to working remote anyway. It's just the intensity has definitely heightened, and it's been tough. I'll just say it, but business has been good, and we are just trying to take care of the people while we get the work done.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I was hoping to ask, a similar question to Stephanie, who, in addition has been, probably so directly affected in the travel and hospitality space. So, Stephanie, I would love to hear how you could, talk about how your team's plans and priorities are shifting in light of employees working remotely across time zones and in fact around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was interesting to hear Pam say that her industry and her company has been used to working in an agile manner and used to working remotely. We were used to working in an agile manner, but always working in person. And so I think that transition initially was likely hard. But over time, it's gone pretty well. I mean, what's interesting is that remote work hasn't really shifted our actual priorities. It's just shifted the way in which we deliver those priorities. And our priorities are still delivering a great customer experience and ensuring that our owners feel our brand offers a great return on investment. But what has changed is how we get things done. And I would say it's been pretty successful. When you're leading a global brand, one thing that's interesting is that you get to see the impact of remote work across different regions. So, in speaking with my team in Australia, 6 months ago, they were all going into the office, and life was back to life pre-COVID. But now they're working remotely. Whereas now everybody in the US and Canada is thinking about how do we get back into the office, and slowly moving back to our pre-COVID lifestyle. And so it's so fascinating being on calls with folks around the world that are constantly adjusting to changes due to COVID-19 and these new variants. But one thing that has been great is when I have my monthly global team meeting, everyone around the world can join. It's not 20 people in a conference room and another 20 people on a screen who can't fully hear, can't fully interact with everybody. It's everybody on equal footing on the screen, able to raise their hand and ask a question to somebody from around the world. So it's really cool to see that sort of engagement. But I would say the downside is, given that our business is global but also local, we have to deeply both understand the experience of our employees in our hotels and in corporate on a local level, but also the experience of our customers. And it's hard to do that when everybody is working remotely and you can't go on site on a regular basis. And so that's really been our focus, is how do we better understand what the experience looks like as we're making all these changes when we can't necessarily be there physically.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I certainly know that it is a benefit to be able to communicate across time zones on whether it's work or social events, and it's hard not to take that for granted. Hey, Pam, I had a general question. I know in the weeks leading up to this, we were talking a bit about your Mix Responsibly campaign, and I was hoping that you might be able to share a little bit about that campaign that you launched and some of the motivation, some of the outcomes that you had. And I know we even had a couple of visuals that we might be able to share with the global audience that we have here, because it really seemed like a good leadership position for you all at Pernod Ricard. I can even show the slides if you'd like to as well.
Great. Yeah, Absolute's always been a brand that's wanting to be at the center of cultural moments, and in a very authentic way. We had started a series of instigation acts, and our latest one is called Mix Responsibly. And it's a whole series of instigation acts around responsibility. It started in 2019 on Valentine's Day with Sex Responsibly, the role alcohol plays in consent. And we moved on and did Vote Responsibly, the role of, vote first, drink second. And then moved into Mix Responsibly. And no matter how you mix with respect. And so we've done some research. I have a deep experience and background in insights and analytics, and we start and stop with the consumer and shopper in mind at all times. So really understanding with empathy where they're at. And we did some research that found, this was back in the fall, when we knew spring, summer, things were going to open up again. We did a study early spring that said 56% of adults still hadn't talked to their friends and family about how they were feeling about coming together again. So this was really about, how do you talk about boundaries? And no matter what your boundary is, whether you're a masker or not, just let's be responsible and mix responsibly. And we had a campaign that started it. We brought in some influencers that really amplified it. And then we went on and got quite a bit of press, earned some really good press around it. It really hit a trifecta, I think, with the Delta variant coming in. We weren't anticipating that, but it became even more of a hot topic around coming together. So, I'd say the lessons we learned is we hit the tone pretty right. It got I think we had over 1.5 billion impressions of free earned media around it. And we're pretty proud of it. And I think Absolute hit the right tone. This was a huge amount of work by the teams, including PR and legal and just doing things right. And, sometimes you happen to hit it, in a good cultural moment, and it worked. And I think right now, as we move forward, is the challenge, right? Like, we're working on lots of brands. I've got 23 that I work on right now. And, we're going into shoots and campaigns and what are we going to do? Should we, and what we're deciding is we need a plan B on all of our campaigns. We can't show those crowded bar scenes anymore. Consumers just won't relate to that. It'll make people feel uncomfortable. So how do we do things outside, distancing, maybe even continue to have options with masks and without. So, that's what we learned, and I think the lesson of just trying to be really in tune with where the consumers are and empathetic on all sides will do well for you.
Yeah, Pam, can I ask one really quick follow-up, and then I might ask
Sure.
a similar question of Stephanie. I know we were talking a bit about potentially how reopening and the Delta variant is affecting Jameson and some campaigns that you've been working on. I was wondering if you might be willing to share a little bit about that, and it echoes some of Stephanie's earlier points just about how the COVID and Delta is not creating any linear trends. You're constantly evolving, having to change how you communicate with internal and external stakeholders alike.
Yeah, so Jameson, one of our biggest brands is global brand. Its ultimate moment is St. Patrick's Day. And when the pandemic hit in March, the week before, St. Patrick's Day, basically, our big campaign that we were launching was Meet You at the Bar. And it was like within a week, we had to completely pivot and we took it all online. And it was a really successful campaign. But as we move forward, again, we're working on what's the next campaign for Jameson. And we have ideas, again, around the bar, around the bartender, about coming together with your friends and family. It's a wonderful whiskey for coming together. And we're having to think of plan A and plan B as we create that shoot, right? Do we show a crowded bar? That's going to make people feel uncomfortable. Although by the time the campaign airs, it might be fine. So we are going to have to spend a little bit more in our production to have a plan A and a plan B as to be attuned to where the consumer is.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess, Stephanie, I had kind of a general question about, are there any ways in which, you're sort of at the brand side, at the marketing side, campaigns have been affected as a result of the variant, ways in which you're in small ways or large, changing how you're kind of communicating with sort of external stakeholders?
Yeah, definitely. What's interesting is that when you work in marketing, sometimes you also feel like you work in change management. I was a consultant for many years, and I really loved the change curve. There were 5 steps: awareness, number 1; number 2, understanding; number 3, acceptance. And for some people, right before step 3 of acceptance, they experience resistance or depression. For others, it might be after acceptance. 4 is adoption, and 5 is ownership. And I found the change curve to be really useful to marketers because in marketing, we tend to love change because it leads to opportunity, it leads to a new campaign, a new way of sharing what our brand has to offer. So marketers might go from awareness to deep understanding of the impact to our customers and our owners to maybe ownership really quickly. But we have to be patient with our stakeholders. They are more likely to spend more time in step 2, which is understanding, or step 3, which is acceptance. So the more time we spend communicating these changes to our stakeholders and deeply understanding what they're going through, not just with regards to experiencing our product, but just what they're going through in general, the better we're able to engage with our customers, engage with our owner base, which is a key stakeholder in our industry, and communicate the value of what we have to offer. One thing that we really focused on this last year is thinking about who is our next gen customer. And when I say next gen, I don't just mean youth, I also mean the next gen business traveler, the next gen leisure traveler, because we saw trends where older folks were traveling more because they were vaccinated earlier. And so they were hitting the road and going on, road trips and seeing local sites. And so in some ways they were part of our next gen traveler. But how do we communicate the value of our brand to all these different demographics, and how do we recognize that they may not fully be in a place of adoption or ownership just yet? And so how do we get them when they're in a place of understanding and acceptance to choose our brand and see the value of staying with us despite all that's going on around them? And so we've been trying to utilize new channels like TikTok. Holiday Inn Express recently launched there, and then other media outlets to share the value of our brands across our portfolio, but as well across the IHG hotels and resorts portfolios.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that I'll have a follow-up question for both of you all about the sort of future of your industries, and I'm quite eager to hear your points of view. I was hoping to share a couple new exclusive results from the global study we did with the ANA on the workforce pertaining to returning to the office. And so I thought I would share a couple of these sort of exclusive findings with you all, because I thought that they were actionable, useful, intriguing. A lot of other sort of words come to mind. So I'll just go one through one, and kind of at a high level, if you're not familiar with what we're doing at Morning Consult, we're interviewing about 30,000 adults every day around the globe. So this was one snapshot of that. And in many cases, we're asking the same questions again and again and again. In fact, we have hundreds of these trends. This figure is really compelling to me. We asked adults in the United States in particular, if their office announced that they could return, how comfortable would they feel? And the green line is that they would feel comfortable. The red line is not comfortable. I think it's worth noting that comfort's gone down about 20 points just in the past, let's say two months. So about half of remote workers would feel comfortable returning to the office. I know both at Pernod Ricard and at IHG, there's a tremendously large workforces, many of whom have in fact been probably working the entire time in the office, but there's a good mix there. I thought this was a trend worth flagging. We've also been asking lots of questions about internal communications. So this, for example, shows that about 4 in 10 of these remote workers say their company has communicated a date to return to in-person work. About a third say their company has not communicated a date, and about 20% say their company's moving to full-time remote. So there's tremendous variation here on this question across industry, even across countries in a lot of the work that we're doing. We even got a bit more granular, and we asked people when they anticipate returning to the office. About 15% said this month in September. Another 14% or so said at the beginning of January 2022. And I thought I would flag on the right hand here that fully 26% say they don't anticipate returning to work in an in-person environment. I thought that would be something worth flagging. We got a bit deeper here, and we just started asking about concerns and what barriers might be, and what could get folks to come back to the office if if a company deems it to be in their interests. I thought I would note 60% plus of these remote workers say they're concerned about exposure to coronavirus, and unvaccinated coworkers, just kind of something worth flagging. We've tested these exact questions globally, especially for a lot of the global folks who are on the call. And I should note that kind of vaccine, if I go back here to concern, and then I go a slide ahead or so, we've been looking over time, and there is a deep reservoir of trust for employers. That's probably really one consideration that has stood out to us since we've started tracking this in November. So there's a purple line here. I trust my employer to make the right decision. That's been hovering around anywhere from 70 to 75% for quite some time. And I thought I would round this out with 2 or 3 quick other findings, and then go back to some great questions with both Stephanie and Pam. This one to me is really, really intriguing. We've been asking remote workers what would make them more or less likely to work in person. And just going from the top, which is green, to the bottom, flexible hours, bonus pay, low COVID counts, and given the Biden administration news, seeing required vaccinations for in-person workers is pretty high up there. About half say they'd be more likely to do so. we could have a whole session on global differences and distinctions, but I should note that we're testing this all globally in this work. That same column in the United States is apparent in this first column, but we have the results in the UK. I should note that flexible hours tends to be the top across markets and countries. And the last finding that I'll show is, yes, there's comfort associated with returning to office, but there are many other things that we're doing our best to understand comfort for. This is a figure that shows how we've been tracking comfort with a range of about a dozen activities, from going to shopping malls, to flying on an airplane, to going on vacation, across all of these markets, and all of which will be distributed with you all during this wonderful session. I should note that across many countries, a quarter or more adults say they're just not comfortable with returning to their normal routine. We were seeing this big increase until about June, and then it's sort of tailed off. So I hope some of those results are helpful and intriguing and get you thinking. And I was hoping to go back maybe to Stephanie first to continue the point that she was making about some of the impact on campaigns, with a bit of a broader question, I suppose, for her. Kind of in your eyes, I'd love to hear kind of what you see as the future of travel and hospitality. I can remember on some previous conversations just being really intrigued with talking about some of the physical potential changes, some of the nature of the travelers changing. But I thought I'd just pause here, and I'd love to hear your sort of expert opinion and experience, Stephanie.
Yeah, it's interesting because the last 18 months really did impact the travel and hospitality industry the most. And at first, I think everybody was nervous that we wouldn't rebound as quickly as we did. But what's interesting about travel is that people really love connecting not just with loved ones, but having new experiences, whether or not that's local or global. And I think the future of travel will really focus on technology innovation. Our industry has not always been known for technology innovation. And maybe the biggest technology innovation was the founding of online travel agencies 25 years ago. But since then, we've kind of been slow to adopt new technologies, maybe even slower than retail or quick service restaurants. But now we're seeing more technology innovation. So everything from digital check-in and digital checkout growing across all hotel estates, to seeing QR codes being used in our restaurants instead of physical menus, to the utilization of messaging apps that I think have been hugely helpful, especially given the need for more staffing in our hotels, that now our colleagues at the hotel level can message guests and say, hey, can I get you additional towels? How can I be helpful to you? And so that's a way of facilitating more communication and aiding the customer experience. And I talked about the importance of understanding the local experience earlier and how that's been harder given that we can't physically go to all the hotels that we used to go to. And technology has also enabled us to do that. So now we do a lot more virtual tours of hotels to better see whether or not they're meeting brand standards, observe the way customers are engaging with the frontline colleagues. And so that's been really good and helpful in aiding us to make sure that we're delivering on our customer experience. I think the other piece around the future of travel that we should really focus on is just the elements of the employee base. A lot of employees left our industry at the beginning of COVID-19, and now we're getting them back into our industry because we're trying to show them the value of being in this industry long term. And I think the future of travel will highly depend on our ability to get folks more interested in our industry again. There are so many people within the hotel companies that have risen from being frontline colleagues to being CEOs of these companies, including Keith Barr, the CEO of IHG. And so we're really excited about encouraging folks to re-enter our industry so that they can help deliver on these great moments of customer experience. But ultimately, the future of travel will be dependent on technology innovation and our people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know we could have a full discussion on that as well. Pam, I was hoping maybe to ask you a similar question about kind of the broader industry that you're in. I know it's another one like Stephanie's that affects just about everyone, either in terms of folks who are working there or traveling or going out or having a nice time. So I would love to hear kind of from your perspective what you see as the future of your industry.
Sure, it's been quite a change for us, for the industry and our business. Our business also benefits from hospitality, bars, travel, and we have a ton of focus there. And a lot of our small and medium business partners that we partner with, have been very impacted by the coronavirus. What we've done is followed the consumer and the shopper, and we do have a weekly tracking that we're just to understand behavior and how this change force is impacting them. I think early on we saw, a return to very trusted brands, big names. So we doubled down on our media spend on those brands, getting, for example, Absolute back on television for the first time in 10 years. And it really accelerated our business as consumers started to shift to an at-home cocktail. I think you might have seen, whether you follow Pinterest or you follow anything, you're probably getting fed some cocktail recipes. Consumers became enamored with, learning how to make cocktails at home and building out their bars. And as the COVID went further, premiumization of the category started to accelerate. So consumers were experimenting with very high-end alcohols at the $100 mark per bottle. And so we've seen a huge premiumization of the category across the board. And shopping became a bit more convenient. It's not very convenient sometimes to shop for alcohol, but with e-commerce platforms popping up and all of the retailers having options for either click and collect or home delivery, who'd have thought you could have, your favorite cocktails delivered to your home? And I think many of these things are going to stick as even bars start to reopen. So we're, continuing to carefully monitor, even state by state, as reopenings happen. We need to be where the consumer is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I was hoping to ask you both a couple questions about advice that you might have for the broader marketing community, given the wonderful audience that we have right now. And I was thinking about maybe starting with Stephanie and asking about some internal stakeholders like employees or perhaps suppliers, and a question around advice. So the specific question I would have for you, Stephanie, would be, what advice would you give to the broader marketing community, for communicating with their internal stakeholders, including employees, given the rapidly changing environment caused by COVID and the Delta variant? Kind of pause there.
It's a great question. I think when it comes to internal stakeholders, the advice is very similar to what I would give for communicating to external stakeholders. And I think there are 3 points. One is, we are here for you. I think everyone is going through so much today, and we know more about what people are going through, not just in professional lives, but also in their personal lives. So taking some time to connect with your stakeholder and understanding how are they feeling in that given day? How can we better support them? And so emphasizing that we are here for you is really important. The second one is, we have to remain flexible and focus on what matters most. So it's everything from deeply understanding how we can better serve our customers to better understanding what sort of potential supply chain issues we might be experiencing or operational issues we might be experiencing. And given those pain points, remaining flexible so that we could all work together to deliver a great experience. And the last point is a little bit of a combination of the first two. Get to know your stakeholders' heart and mind. In our industry, given that we have 2 sets of real stakeholders outside of employees, we have our 2,000 hotel owners, and then we have our customers. For our owners, we have to deeply understand what they might be experiencing, given that for many of them, hotels were shut down for a few months. And for others, business has been absolutely booming. So our experience in engaging with these 2 segments of owners changes our communication strategy because their heart and their minds are in different places. When you think about our customers, it's the same. Some customers are traveling to reconnect with families. Other customers are being maybe forced to travel for work, and so they just want to have a good experience because they're delivering great things for our society, but maybe there's parts of them that wish they could be home. And then there are customers that are just excited to be on the road again. And so for those folks, I was in a hotel this past weekend and met somebody in the lobby who actually used to travel all the time for work and just missed being in a hotel lobby. And so actually came to a hotel lobby just to work that day. But all these different customers are experiencing different things. So getting to know their hearts and minds is really important. And then lastly, you mentioned our employee base, and it's incredibly important that you deeply understand where your employees are at any given point in time. And so I start every conversation with just, how are you doing? What's new? How can I be more helpful to you before we get into work? Because I think it aids us, one, in building connection with each other, but two, also delivering a better work product when everybody feels like, one, their manager, but then two, their organization truly does support them. So three things: we're here for you. We have to remain flexible and focus on what matters most, and getting to know your stakeholders' hearts and minds.
That was fantastic. And thank you, Stephanie. Pam, might I be able to ask the same question of you, kind of if you might have some advice to the broader marketing community or anybody who might be watching now about, how you might want to communicate with other internal stakeholders?
Sure. And it's funny, I will admit you gave us this question ahead of time, and my answers are going to sound very similar to Stephanie's. I think we probably as leaders have learned, what is needed. Our mantra for the past year is advance through ambiguity. We don't know what the future holds, and a lot of people turn to me or to other leaders or even to marketing as a function. What should we do? What do we do next? And I always say, look, I have a compass. I don't have a GPS, and we're figuring this out together. So help partner as we, advance through ambiguity. And that means we need to be flexible. Again, focusing on what matters, and that is actually going to change. It's not going to be the same. And so we need that continuous feedback loop, checking in with our stakeholders across the business to see, what the issues are and how do we change? I love the analogy is, marketing is bit of leading a change management right now. So how do we, shift if we have supply chain issues? How do we shift if we have a retailer issue? So being flexible, continuous feedback on what's going on in the market, keeping that pulse. I think the last one for me is empathy, and it's funny. I started out when I first got here to needing to get to know people, and for me, it's important to know people as humans, not just what we do every day in the business. So my leadership team and we do a thing called check-in round. It takes a good 20, 30 minutes. It feels sometimes like, we got so much to talk about, but it's so important. Over time, week after week, with these check-in rounds, we start to learn each other's, lives and the things that are going on that we had no idea. And that just builds empathy. And, that idea of check-in rounds, checking in with your stakeholders, checking in with your consumers, checking in with your shoppers, checking in with customers and retailers, like really understanding, what the pulse is, because where it was even 3 months ago might not be the same today or tomorrow. So those check-in rounds so that we can develop that empathy and have better solutions to solve forward through all this ambiguity.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I thought it might be an okay segue for me to share kind of a third and final section of a few findings about communicating internally. And then we even have some sort of breaking brand new research on the Biden administration's requirements for companies over 100 people to have their employees vaccinated. But I thought I would show a few things that stood out to me. So, for example, we were asking all of these remote workers, sort of thinking about the way your company communicates about COVID policies. What does your company use, and do you find them helpful? So the two separate questions. In the green, this is what has your company used? So all staff meetings, email newsletters, direct discussions with the manager are those that these remote workers have said their company has used most often. But on the right-hand side, those are not always the ones that are perceived as most helpful. Remote employees are most likely to say that direct discussions with their manager, parts of regularly recurring team meetings, I think like you just mentioned a moment or two ago, were quite keen and quite important, I think, for a bunch of reasons. We have all this information globally. I thought that maybe one key takeaway would just be, again, highlighting the importance of direct discussions with managers. This is a perceived helpfulness on each of the measures across the 6 countries in which we did our research. And then I thought I would show another finding that really did stand out to me in all the research we did with the ANA. How much would you agree with a wide range of statements? I think people feeling like they're involved sure seems to move the needle. If you look at the bottom, about half of people, these remote workers, say their company asked their opinion and feedback, and about 40% say that is not the case. That is much lower than if you look at the top, where 84% of remote workers say that they know how their work fits in the success of the company. So the ongoing surveys or feedback or meetings that you had mentioned just a moment ago, I think could be particularly unique and helpful here. I thought I'd show 2, maybe more figures before going back to Stephanie and Pam for a few closing questions and thoughts. But over the weekend, we got some information on the vaccine mandate and how that might affect the workforce. It seemed absolutely on topic with what we were talking about here with global workforce considerations, as I'm sure many of you know and are directly affected by the Biden administration announced on Thursday a range of policies. I thought it should be worth noting about 6 in 10 adults say that they support encouraging states to require COVID-19 vaccination for all school employees. It's about 60% for healthcare workers. That's that first bar. And it's about 58% for requiring all employers with at least 100 workers to mandate vaccinations or testing. We have 3 bars here. Democrats, about 80% support there, and about a third of Republicans in fact support there. But we have lots of information here that hopefully could be useful. We followed up, and many people in fact do perceive that the requirement will reduce COVID-19 cases, that it could increase COVID-19 vaccination rates, and about half say that they think it could help the economy grow. I think for the marketers in the marketing community, we even asked a question that said, would you be more or less likely to buy from companies that had implemented this requirement? 3 to 1, people said they would be more likely to buy than less likely to buy. Of course, that might vary by industry, but I thought it was worth noting. And we have a wide range of questions around whether people see it more as protecting rights or violating rights. And people are mixed, but support is higher than that 46% overall. So I thought I would share a couple of those findings kind of as a segue into a couple of closing questions and thoughts. And I was wondering, Pam, if I might be able to go back to you. You were sharing some insights on general lessons for the marketing community about communicating with internal stakeholders such as your employees. I was wondering if you would have any other perhaps unique feedback about to the marketing community about communicating with external stakeholders such as your customers or other key members of the Pernod Ricard community. I know it was nice to hear a little bit about a number of the campaigns that you've either launched or modified in recent months. But Pam, would you have any general advice to the marketing community in terms of communicating with external stakeholders?
Sure. I think I think it's well known that consumers are expecting more from brands than ever before. That, we say, consumers aren't just buying brands, they want to buy into a brand. And so they need to know, and they want to know where you stand. And you need to do that authentically. And so that whole idea of where you stand, a brand stands, its point of view on any issue, it has to come from an authentic place. But no longer can you say, well, we're not not going there. This is business. It's not personal. Business is personal. Our business lives and our personal lives are mixed. Consumers are spending, a ton of time. They have a lot more time, right, to be able to research brands and get involved in things that are important to them. We see this divisiveness even in your presentation today along political lines. So where do you stand? And for those that matter to you, the consumer, that's that whole saying, right? For those that it matters, they won't mind, and for those that mind, it doesn't matter. And so you have to take a stand more than ever before, but it's got to come from a place of authenticity and respect. So really making sure you know where you want to take a stand and what its impact is going to be, and you're not going to be able to please everybody. How does that impact what we're doing? We have dramatically increased and added to our communication staff, people who are experts and the fine nuances of comms strategy, and everything we do is filtered through our comms team. And so your agency may be able to come up with a really unique twist, but if it's just off tone a little bit, it could really backfire. And we've seen this a number of times, and I'm really proud of the work we were able to walk that fine line. It's absolute, and we couldn't have done it without that professional help.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Hey, Stephanie, I know you covered some of the internal stakeholders and perhaps even touched on this a little bit, but would you be able to offer some insights and wisdom that you might have on communicating with some of the myriad external stakeholders that you have?
Yes, definitely. And I love what Pam said about authenticity. We have so many ways where we engage with external stakeholders. As I mentioned, one group of our stakeholders are owner-based. So I have a owner advisory council that I meet with on a regular basis to understand what their experience has been like and what they're hearing from customers, what they're hearing from suppliers. And I ensure that I'm actively engaging with them so that I can better understand how we can market the brand. And then in terms of engaging with customers, I think, especially at this time, deeply understanding insights from your customers is very important because our customer base has absolutely changed during this time. We have more of certain segments, less of other segments, and that's changing across different regions at different moments in time. And so essentially we have to be really thoughtful about how we engage with our customers in these different regions. And to do that, we need to communicate with them on a regular basis. So we have surveys, we have focus groups. I actively, when I travel, try to engage with customers just to understand what their experience is like. But I liked Pam's point around authenticity because the root of authenticity is connection. And the root of connection is having the time to better understand what somebody's experience is. And so I think for marketers, we have to continue to engage with our products. And we have to continue to engage with all of our stakeholders so that we can understand both their heart and where their minds are at. And then I think the last point I would just share is, we're in all of this together, right? And I think sometimes because our world likes to either segment each other based on political lines or regional lines or religious lines or whatever line you want to choose, this has been a moment in time where we truly have been in this together and have had to work together to find the right answers. And I think for marketers, it's also a time for us to demonstrate the value of that togetherness for our brands. For us, we have 3,000 hotels. So we have tremendous scale. With that scale comes a large employee base, comes a lot of customers we serve on a regular basis. And given that they're all coming through the same doors and experiencing the same guest rooms, eating the same breakfast, there's an opportunity to facilitate more togetherness within that experience. And that's something that we're also actively focused on.
Well, that was wonderful. And hey, Pam, I had a separate question for you. I thought it was a kind of distinct pleasure that we have you and you're a member of the ANA board. I was wondering if you had a highlight maybe of your time on the board, and I was wondering maybe even more broadly, because we have a lot of people on on the webinar, maybe if people want to get more involved in the ANA, what should they be doing? How could they be doing it? Would you have any sort of recommendations there?
Thank you. It's such a great resource with so many resources, right? So many areas that you could dive into. I would say follow your passion points so that you can not only learn more and contribute more, but I would say look for those things that you're not quite sure of and just explore. I came in into the CMO role, like I said, 2 months into COVID, and my very first week on the job, I was asked, so should we join the boycott, social media boycott on Facebook? And I had just come from Disney, where part of my job was, through deep analytics, understanding what was happening with all the trolls that were against some of our movies, really manipulating a lot of Rotten Tomatoes scores. We saw it and we knew it, and we worked very closely with them to fix the platform so that couldn't be manipulated. But I felt like it was something I knew a lot about, and I jumped right into this, to the whole responsibility platform. And I think you're going to hear more about Engage Responsibly. It's an initiative we'll be rolling out around tackling hate speech. It's important for our social media has become part of our lives, part of our consumers' lives, and part of our lives as marketers. And so forgive me for getting on the platform here, but we need those environments to be sustainable. Just like we care about our environmental sustainability, how are we caring for our social sustainability in our social lives? And so we need to work together with the platforms and collectively as an industry to make sure that these platforms are healthy and thriving, and the consumer base is growing, because it's important to our marketing, but it's also important to people's lives. In some cases, it's how we stay connected. My oldest daughter lives in Africa. If it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't know what was going on in her life. So that's something I got really passionate about, and I know AIM is taking that on, and more to come. Announcements, I think, happening today, but that's where I dove in and have passions and my team. But I'm still, exploring so much to offer, from case studies to best practices, and enjoyed it.
Well, hey, thank you for sharing that. And would you believe it? But 52 minutes has already passed with this back and forth. And I'm so very appreciative to you both for taking the time to chat and to share a wide range of your experiences and your insight. I was thinking maybe in closing, I might ask if there's any final thoughts you have, or anything we didn't ask that you thought we should cover. I thought from my side, I should note that I think anything we shared will be put up into the portal so you can see the results and the findings. And if there's anything I've learned in doing a lot of this research, it's really key to look at how different groups might react to similar policies. I think remote work and return to work and return to office has been viewed quite differently based on your income, your location, your country of origin, you name it. So we're doing our best to keep in touch on those considerations. But maybe I'll go. Stephanie, is there anything we perhaps didn't ask you that we should have? And maybe would you have any sort of closing thoughts to share with the broader community? And I should say thank you again.
Of course. Well, Kyle, I feel like you asked so many great questions. Nothing that you didn't ask that you should have asked. But I'll just close by saying, one, thank you for having me. It's been so great to connect with you all. And I just want to highlight the fact that the travel industry and the hotel industry, I think we're on the precipice of greatness. And so what's been great about our industry is that pre-COVID, it was growing tremendously. And then when COVID hit, it forced us to take some time, innovate on our brand experience, and really focus on what matters most, both for our owners and our guests. And so as a marketer, it's been a fun time to really think about how do we better engage with all stakeholders, potentially through new channels, potentially through new ways of communication, but also from a brand experience perspective, how do we ensure that we're delivering on our brand promise, but maybe not focusing on some of the things that we thought mattered before, but focusing on the elements of the customer experience that customers are telling us that they love. And so I speak about that because I want to encourage you, if you're a marketer out there and haven't thought about the travel or hotel industry, to give us a chance and reach out, because we definitely are looking for great marketers. And then lastly, I would say, just as a leader and somebody who really does care about not just my employee base, but what the future of work looks like. Kyle, I loved all your comments on whether or not employees are interested in going back into the workforce and how do we work more effectively remotely. The reality is remote work or hybrid work is likely the future across a variety of different industries. And what's exciting about that is, my hope is that people actually experience better work-life balance. But what else is exciting about that is we're going to be able to have a broader impact for folks that run global businesses. We're going to be able to see more, understand more about our customer base, because we'll be able to engage more around the world. And so my hope is that despite some of the issues with people either feeling overworked, some people feeling too connected, some people feeling less connected, my hope is that we are able to work through all those pain points in order to have actually a better work-life experience. And so I'm super excited about the future as work as well. And so thank you so much for having me. I think it's very exciting to see all that marketers are doing despite COVID-19, and all that our brands are doing to continue to provide a great experience for our customers. And so it's been a really interesting conversation. I've enjoyed engaging with you both.
That was incredible. And Pam, maybe could you take us to the finish with any closing thoughts that you might have, or anything we missed in this wonderful conversation so far?
Sure. I think about having a deep history in consumer insights and analytics, following trends, consumer habits, even our own personal habits are really hard to change. They change slowly over time. Unless a big change force enters your life, you have a health scare, or there's a recession. This is probably one of the biggest change forces that we've experienced in the business world in 100 years, since the Industrial Revolution. And we're going to look back on these times and see all the innovation that were spurred by this moment. And it'll change lives forever. The future of work, exactly what Stephanie was saying, like how work gets done. We're already seeing, I'm sure of leaders, executives who probably never worked in the cloud before, didn't work on documents online in real time. That's changing. People are having to do that to get work done now. People who never clicked and did an e-commerce buy. My dad, how do I do something on Amazon? So for the first time, you have people changing habits. And once that habit is kind of learned, they're not going back. So this is an accelerator of trends that had been in the works. It spurred better innovation. All of these, remote platforms got better and stronger and can handle more capacity. It's wonderful. And it's hard to go through it in the moment because it's uncomfortable. We miss our old routines. We miss working the way we used to work. And we're just gonna have to find new routines and new ways to work, because we are human beings at the core of this, and we're social. That's what makes us different. And so how we come together, how we find the ways to connect and not feel so disconnected in the future, that's for us to invent and figure out moving forward. I think we will still come together physically. We will still travel. It's just going to be a lot less in the future, and we're going to make those times purposeful and meaningful. And I'm just excited to see what how humans adapt to change.
Well, thank you for closing us out. That certainly felt like a productive remote conversation in my view. And I guess I would just say thank you to the ANA for facilitating this, for bringing everybody together, for helping us all recognize the importance of these conversations. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Pam. I can't wait for more collaborations and conversations in the future. So thank you all.
Thank you.